3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Fourth Line Podcast, part of Full Press Radio. This is May the 16th, 2022. With you today is myself, Carl, and Stevie Nick.
How was your weekend, Carl?
It was great in several different ways. Way number one, fantastic weather. Had a family barbecue, so hard to be disappointed there. Way number two, we had 5 Game 7s on Saturday and Sunday.
It was an amazing weekend for hockey. Playoff hockey and elimination playoff hockey. That was amazing.
Overtime playoff elimination hockey.
Many overtime. Like 2 last night.
Yeah, 100% of games on Sunday went to Game 7 OT, which is all you can hope for, really.
I went to a punk rock show on Saturday night. So I don't know if you can tell that my voice is a little scratchy right now.
Now that you mention it, yes.
I had a very cathartic night screaming in the crowd.
Who'd you go see?
This band, it's a Toronto band called Pup, P-U-P, Pup the band. And they're like a mix of, oh man, I don't know. Okay, here's my gut feel. They're a mix. They're like Arkells meets Alexis on Fire.
Okay, so like a more intense Arkells.
Like fast-paced, kind of yelly, but not screamo.
Nice.
But really good melodies. So it was a lot of fun. But that's why I'm sounding a little scratchy.
Well, get some tea in you. Take care of those vocal cords. We didn't do our typical vocal warm-up before the show, so...
No, should we do it live on the air right now?
Why don't you lead us in it? Yes.
Okay. Do, re, you, me, fa. So, that's a good one.
Thank you.
Better than usual.
You know what? I tried. Well, thank you very much.
We're all warmed up.
We are warmed, and the NHL did us a solid by giving us a night off. I mean, I'm not particularly happy to be waiting yet another day for Colorado Avalanche playoff hockey to get back underway. However, with there being no games tonight, it works really well for the podcast.
Everything lined up perfectly for us for once.
It started on a Monday. Now, second round is going to start on a Tuesday. If we can get them all starting on Tuesdays, this is going to be perfect.
It's great because we get to recap the last round and we get to preview the next one.
I think in our 7, 8, however many seasons that it has been that we've done this show, it has never happened that a round has ended before and hasn't started and we could actually do this type of episode.
Yeah, it's very excited. This is what happens on your victory lap, right?
They're just throwing us bones. So let's start. Let's get the way we're going to do it. There was some news this week. We'll see if we can get to it. If you didn't see, Vegas fired their coach. The Islanders hired someone and they announced a bunch of award nominees. We might get to them. We might not. However, let's get started. What we're going to do is we're going to preview each series. As part of each preview, we're going to look backwards at what just took place. We've got a couple state and provincial rivalries happening here in the second round. First up, the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Florida moving on over the Washington Capitals in 6 games. A surprising 6-game series for several reasons. One, I don't think it should have gone 6, but the way that series was played, at the start of it, I didn't think it should go 6. But by the way that series was played, I'm shocked it didn't go 7.
Also, an overtime elimination game, wasn't it?
That sounds correct.
I think it was. It was like in hockey terms right now. It was weeks. It feels like it was weeks ago. But Carter Verhaeghe pretty much lifted them out of that series, right? I think it was
pretty much
game 5. He put up 5 points. Game 6, he scores the OT winner.
Yeah, 2 goals, 3 assists in game 5. The OT winner in game 6. Super impressive. Standout
performer. Right behind him, though, Carl, Claude Giroux, I thought was amazing in that series.
Yeah, and I've been very underwhelmed with him up until that point. Did a great job. and needed to, because both of these teams did a very good job of shutting down the offensive firepower of each other, right? Like Ovechkin was nowhere to be seen. TJ Oshie became the star for Washington, while Verhaeghe was for the Panthers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think because of that, like this series ended up being way more even than it should have been. And actually, I think that's going to be a pretty common sentiment as we go through each first round here.
Yeah. Any takeaways for Washington after this series?
I don't know. I think, Washington peaked in terms of talent, in terms of Stanley Cups and success in the playoffs. I think they're on their way down now. So it's not surprising to me. I think that it's just try to ride this out as much as you can, but they're getting to the point where they got to strike a balance. Like you don't want to go full Red Wings and just deplete everything, but to keep trying to make the playoffs and make first, second round exits. But you don't want to bottom out completely the way some of these other teams have, because it's hard to come back from that. So, but that's going to have to start pretty soon in the next few years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they are, because I mean, it is an older roster, but they've got some good young talent, right? Like Ilya Samsonov, certainly a good enough starter for this team to be in playoff contention, to be close to winning series against the President's Trophy winner. So I think we'll see a good amount of them moving forward, but probably still fringe playoff wild card for next year.
Yeah, I think so. They don't really have that. I mean, they have Ovi, but they don't have that next, Ovi level player coming up. And I think that's the kind of player that they're going to need going forward. I mean, Ovi's not going anywhere.
You know what? If they could just find one of the greatest goal scorers of all time on their roster somewhere, I think that would be a win.
He's not going anywhere, but he's also getting older.
He is. Yeah. All right. On the flip side, the Tampa Bay Lightning eliminating the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7.
Oh man. I don't know where to start on this one. Demons, man.
See, okay. So when I watched that series, Toronto played as good of a series as a losing team could play. They came up against an incredibly good Tampa team. They played really well, not well enough to win. I would say they did play well enough to win. I think there were some games that were a coin flip decision, right? There were some for both teams that were complete blowouts and not even close. But I think Toronto could have won it. I'm not saying they should have, but they could have. They did not embarrass themselves. And yet we're still left here with do you blow up the team after losing to the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions in the first round? And it just seems entirely unnecessary at this point.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I don't think it's they could have won. I think it is they should have won. I thought they outplayed Tampa most of that series. That game 6 overtime, Toronto, it was all Toronto, I thought. And it came back the other way, and Brayden Point scored.
Which goes into our theory that we had the other day, right? The longer it goes, the more likely that something dumb like Austin Matthews blowing a tire, the puck can go the other way and game over.
I did think that the Leafs' kind of greatest flaw was on display in this series, and Tampa exploited it a little bit. Like their lack of defensive depth, and they're just barely above average goaltending. So, like when we talk, I know all the talk now is about what are the Leafs going to do? Do not blow up this roster. Like you said, they lost to the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion. Like if they faced Nashville and lost to Nashville, okay, that's a different conversation. Do not blow up this roster. This core, they need to stay together. They are good enough. I think maybe you can tinker a little bit with your bottom 4 defensemen. You got to go find a goalie, I think. At least someone who can share the crease with Jack Campbell, because they thought they did that this year with Mrazek. Didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. That would definitely be a helpful thing. But I mean, even the idea of trying to blow up this core. No one has been able to successfully do that, right? Like, when was the last time a team was like, we're going to blow this up, and it worked well for them? You're not going to get anything that you think you will for Mitch Marner because the cap is still super depressed and no one can afford anything. And that's the piece people want to get rid of, right? William Nylander started cool, had a really great second half to this series, and you are making a decision off of a 7-game sample size when Mitch Marner had an outstanding season.
Yeah. If so did Nylander, frankly, like not as good as Marner, but he still had a pretty good season. The whole team had a great season.
Yeah. Like you said, are there holes? Yes. Every team has holes, but
the thing is, there's more evidence of not blowing it up leading to success, right? You look at that Capitals team that won the cup. How many times did they roll out that same lineup over and over and over again?
And kept losing. I mean, lost to Pittsburgh, lost to really good teams, and decided, we're going to stay the course. And eventually it paid off.
Yeah. So I don't think blowing up the team is the answer here. I do think maybe look at a coaching change.
Yeah. I would be surprised.
I would be surprised too. But if you're going to do anything, that's what I do.
Okay.
I'm not a big Sheldon Keefe fan.
No, clearly.
That's just me.
So that brings us then to Tampa versus Florida, a matchup that, if it wasn't for the fact that we have the Battle of Alberta happening on the other side, incredible rivalry, right? These two teams have played each other all the time. I'm excited for this series.
Yeah, and they played last year in the first round, did they not? Am I misremembering that? And that was a great series.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think it's going to be more reminiscent of the Toronto series that we saw than the Washington series. I think because Tampa, while being very good, is nowhere near as good defensively as they once were.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that series, right, I saw a lot of Tampa just really focusing offensively and setting up that, and taking some chances, which led to opportunities the other way for the Leafs. And I think we're going to see even more of that with Florida.
Yeah, it's, I have Florida winning this series, and it's not because I think that they're a better team than Tampa. Like, I think you're right. It's going to be more like Toronto, Tampa, and that these teams are much more even on a talent level. What I found with Tampa in that first round, it didn't look like they had that Stanley Cup spark in them. I thought they kind of looked tired. They kind of looked a little like apathetic and lethargic. And it's funny to say that because they took the Leafs to 7 games and won, but they just didn't look like that same fiery Tampa Bay team, which makes me wonder, are they at the end of their rope here? And does their rope end in Sunrise against the Florida Panthers?
Well, and it's not going to help the fact that Brayden Point likely out for at least game 1 of the series. They're obviously not going to disclose too much information, but looking like he won't play in game 1. And that kind of adds to that issue, right? Of guys being tired because now you're having to play more minutes than you're used to. And it kind of ramps up on itself.
Yeah. So we'll see if Vasilevsky can maintain that level of play that he had against Toronto, because I thought he kept them in most of those games.
For sure he did.
It'll make it interesting against Florida, but I'm taking Florida.
All right. I have Tampa going. I know that I was supposed to pick Tampa all the way to the end. Accidentally picked the Rangers. We'll get to that shortly. But I've got Tampa winning this one. I mostly just because they are the champs. They've been the champs before, and I have a very hard time picking against them. They showed that they could come back in that series, right, in both games, and being able to push that series to 7. So I think I would go Tampa. Head note: so that game starts Tuesday night. That's the early game. The late game on Tuesday, Colorado versus St. Louis. I really don't have much to say about the Colorado-Nashville series other than I miss my team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just looking at my bracket now. I called Colorado in 4, and I called Colorado in 5, and it went Colorado in 4.
And
it's not surprising at all, though.
No, in no way. I love Cale Makar. That's the only other thing. I mean, I'll talk about that again when we talk about the matchup against St. Louis, but love me some Cale Makar.
Yeah, I do too. I'm excited to actually get to watch some of the games in the series because the Colorado Nashville and the Minnesota St. Louis series were the two that I watched the least of in the first round.
Well, and now that there's only 2 games a night, it's a little bit easier to get those in. So
exactly.
And they're going to be split up, which is nice. There's like the early and the late. So that'll help. St. Louis, Minnesota. St. Louis taking that one in 6, which is a little bit surprising to me. It was a close matchup. The big difference was St. Louis made the switch after game 3, giving up 6 goals in game 2, 5 in game 3, went to Jordan Binnington for game 4, and won the next 3 games to close out that series in pretty resounding fashion.
Yeah, Jordan Binnington, their playoff performer goalie. Hey, every time I looked at the scores of these games, I cringed a little bit because every week we played this series up about how it's going to be a tight, close 7-game series, not a ton of scoring. And it was like literally the complete opposite of everything I said.
Not a single game. I would say not a single game in that series was close. Like the closest result was a 3-goal differential in games 4 and 5. None of them were close. It was not a particularly great series. And it was interesting. I mean, Cam Talbot came in the last game as well, subbing out for Marc-Andre Fleury. And it is rare that we get that happening, but Minnesota did better than I think a lot of people expected this year. And I could see them running this back next year. Kaprizov defined himself. He's a bona fide top talent in the league, and they'll keep building around him.
Well, they kind of have to run it back next year, right? Like with the buyouts on Parise and Suter, the cap staying pretty neutral, right? It's going up by $1 million next year. And those cap hits hitting their books, they're going to be handcuffed. Like there's not going to be much they can do.
Yeah. Next year, as it stands, they've got $7 million in cap space. Really only Marc-Andre Fleury coming off. No one really big. They got to sign Kevin Fiala, and that might be the only move that they make. So,
yeah. So I don't know. It's not a great result for them, but I mean, if this core gets closer and better, then, they could be back here next year.
So Colorado has not lost a game probably since April at this point in time. I didn't actually look up when the last time they lost was. Let's look. Last time Colorado lost a game was April 29th.
Wow.
Against Minnesota. The very limited sample size between these two teams. At the end of the season, like the last week, the Avs and the Blues played each other. Avs won 5-3. By that point in time, neither team was playing for that much, but tells us something maybe. What do you see in this Blues Avs series?
It's definitely going to be harder for the Avalanche than the Nashville series was. So, it wouldn't surprise me if the Blues came out and won game 1. The Avs had it pretty easy against Nashville. They've been sitting for a while, and the Blues are coming into this with a ton of energy and momentum. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them come out strong. I could see the series going as many as 6 games, but I'm taking Colorado all day.
Yeah, I have a very hard time not picking the team that swept when every other series went 6 or 7 games. I just have a hard time not picking them. And I get that Nashville was a easier opponent, but this Colorado team showed everything that we needed them to. They showed that when they were down, even in game 4, right? Down against Nashville, came back, won that game, can win in overtime, and can do it without really needing a big performance from Darcy Kemper in net, right? Paolo Francouz came in, Still not 100% certain if Kemper will be back. I think they're looking to have him. Pardon the possibly inappropriate pun there, unintended. Looking to have him. I almost switched it from looking to eyeing, which would have been way worse.
Or better.
But looking that he might be in for game one. But won that series without needing a great goaltending performance, which is really what you want.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I don't really have much more to add to that.
Yeah, well, there you go. Avs. I'll go Avs in 5 in this one.
Okay. All right. Wouldn't surprise me.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a break here. It's a little early, but that gives us enough time to dive into these last 2 series, perhaps get to some of that news of the week. So we'll be back afterwards, taking a look at the other 2 series. 3, 2, 1.
All right. So let's get to the alternate night of games. Right. We just did Tuesdays, so let's do Wednesdays.
Yes. And it's not going to line up the same way. They did an amazing job of actually being able to schedule everything so that it lined up the exact right days through the entire first round.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of maybe concerts, things like that normally would bump teams out of arenas maybe aren't as full as they normally would be, maybe a little later. So shared NBA arenas aren't as much of an issue, but amazing job. Doesn't happen this week. Doesn't happen in this series. We've got Tampa, Florida playing a back-to-back this weekend.
Yeah. So like something must be going on in Florida that they can't play on whatever day it is. Thursday?
Should be
or Friday?
Tuesday, Thursday. I think it's Saturday. They should No, I think they're supposed to play Saturday, and I think they play Sunday, Monday instead.
Is that what it is? Yeah. And Sunday they play at like 1:30 in the afternoon, and then Monday they play at 7 p.m. or something like that.
Right.
Weird scheduling.
I'm fine with back-to-backs in the playoffs. It's just a little surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
But yes, these are the 2 games that get started on Wednesday. We'll start with the early game again. Eastern Conference, Carolina Hurricanes, New York Rangers. The top 2 teams in the Metro Division facing off kind of as expected, right? I mean, they were the higher seeds. Carolina 2nd in the conference, Rangers 4th in the conference. Kind of what you would think.
I mean, it was as expected before the first round started, but I think about halfway through the first round, this wasn't necessarily the most expected result, because I think both Boston and Pittsburgh took their opponents much further than anyone thought they would.
Yeah, let's start with Carolina and Boston. That series did not end as early, like you said, not as early as a lot of people thought, right? That one went 7 games, and even in that 7th game, right, it was not a close 7th game. I think when we think back on all of these, right, like so many of them overtime, things like that. But even in a 3-2 game, the way that it was not particularly close.
No, it wasn't. I don't know. It's hard to zoom in on one game, especially it being a game 7. But Boston has not just a team; these players have proven track records in game 7. So it's pretty surprising to see them looking as cold as they did. But you know what, Carl? Like we just talked about scheduling for the second round. They had some weird time slots for games too. Like their game 7 was at 4:30 in the afternoon.
That is, but both teams had to play at 4:30 in the afternoon. So yeah, I don't think that gives that doesn't give either team an advantage, right? Both of them are playing at a weird time.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. Go ahead.
If anything, I think Boston plays a lot of weird times. Like whenever I turn on hockey on a Saturday, there's almost always a Boston game on.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I mean, they're probably used to that. But Carolina came out, and like I said, it was a 1-goal game, but Carolina kind of defined that pace for most of the game. Late in the third, Boston did have a pretty good pushback, but it just really felt like it was going to be theirs the whole time, and that almost every one of them Boston got was kind of a a lucky play. But I would kind of put Boston in the same camp as the Capitals that we just finished talking about, which is fitting because they were both the wild card teams.
Yeah.
Where, had a lot of success before, aging roster starting to come out, but some potential of younger guys coming in.
Yeah, I think the difference in their series is you mentioned that Florida was able to shut down some of Washington's top scorers. Boston's top scorers dominated the games that they won. And I think that's what you got to see from those guys, especially the fact that the younger guys aren't ready to take that torch yet. It's like, that's what you want to see. It's just, we're getting to a point now where that's not good enough for these guys anymore. Right. They're not the players that they used to be.
Exactly. And it does definitely shows the Taylor Hall signing was a great addition, right?
Yeah,
giving that
totally.
extra offense, a huge piece that they very much needed.
Yeah, totally. This was the one series though that as it was going on, my pick before the series was Carolina, and I was confident in Carolina right through to the end. Some of the other ones I was a little iffy on who would actually come out the other side, but I always felt Carolina would come out of this one.
Same. Yeah. And actually one that I flip-flopped multiple times on was this next series, Rangers and Pittsburgh. And this one, I mean, we sat here last week and you wrote down, did you not, our picks for this series?
I think I just wrote down yours.
Well, what did I say? Let's let me.
I only wrote down yours. All right. This series. There's your smart pick and your irresponsible pick. You want to know what your smart pick was?
Sure.
Pittsburgh in 6.
Shows how smart I am.
Your irresponsible pick was New York in 6.
Well, should have flipped those. Should have flipped them. But the turning point in this series, and it seemed very evident because literally it was less than 30 seconds later that the Rangers scored, was Sidney Crosby leaving. Was it game 5?
Yeah. Pulled out of game 5. Did not even play in game 6.
No. And came back in game 7. Yeah.
Which is always a little, I'm like, I don't know if you're actually healthy, but it's game 7. How can you not play?
You would think if anyone knows their body and how it handles concussions, it would be Sidney Crosby. That said, who knows if he actually was that, but do you think that hit from Trouba on Crosby should have been suspended?
No, I don't. It looks bad at high speed, I think, but I don't think it was that bad.
No, I don't think that it was that bad. I don't think there was anything malicious in it. I think it was just unavoidable contact that they had. Yeah. Brutal for the Penguins, though, because I still think that without that injury and just literally just watching a team get deflated as quickly as they did, it's literally just like you just popped the balloon and they fell apart. I think without that injury, Pittsburgh still, my smart pick is still Pittsburgh in 6. If Crosby doesn't get hurt.
I don't know, man. I have such a hard time reading this series. And I think this was the most entertaining series of the first round because it felt like every game after game 4, maybe, or 3, Pittsburgh went up by a couple goals. New York caught back up. And then it was like a ping pong game of someone scoring, someone tying, someone scoring, someone tying, someone scoring, someone tying. Like it was just the scoring and the pace of it was incredible in this series. And I don't know, because even in game 7 with Crosby in the lineup, the Pens were up 2-0.
And then they came marching on back.
And then the Rangers came marching on back with 2 unanswered goals. Like it was wildly entertaining. It really could have gone either way. But the Penguins did something else in game 7. Which we mentioned in that Minnesota game that I kind of want to get your thoughts on. They put Tristan Jarry in net because he was back from his injury, and they inserted him into game 7. You mentioned Minnesota inserting Cam Talbot into game 7. Like, what do you think of these coaching decisions to put in a goalie cold at that point in the series?
I very much do not support that decision to put Jarry in game 7. No chance. Domingue should have started that game. And hindsight being what it was, but even before that, I thought it's not the right choice. Domingue's played fine. Domingue had played well enough. Sure, he wasn't your starter the entire year, but Jarry's not fully there yet. And I don't put that loss fully on him. That was kind of just a team loss that game. But Domingue could have done just as well as that. Domingue could have done better than that. And so I think what we've seen, it's tough to make that decision, right? I don't fault Mike Sullivan at all. I get wanting to go back to your guy, but he shouldn't.
I agree. I thought Domingue, like, he let in some softies all series, but some of the collapses that they had in these games was a complete team collapse. You can't pin that just on the goalie. And I think he earned that game 7 start and he deserved it. And I just don't think it's a good idea to put an injured goalie who's just coming off of an injury. Maybe he's not injured anymore. Without any momentum, just plop him into an elimination game like that. It's brutal.
Yeah. And I get that, like, you have the boost of getting Crosby back and you can be like, oh, we got Jarry, we got Crosby, let's go. But just trust in the guys that have gotten you there so far.
Yeah. So what do you think's next for this Pittsburgh team?
I think they're in the same boat as Washington and Boston. This one gives a little bit more of a potential for something bigger to happen, though, because, there are guys who have deals coming up with this team in particular, right? Sidney Crosby still has time left on his deal, but this is the last year for Evgeny Malkin. And I would not there's not a lot of teams that have 9, 10, whatever he would want, even 8, 7. Like, there's not a lot of teams that have that much cap space. But if there is a cup contending team that can go out and pick him up, Chris Letang's deal is up. And I would not be surprised if either of those guys decided to go for something else with a team that they think could take them further.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say with these guys that have spent their entire career with this team and had a lot of success. Right? Like, they're very close with a lot of their teammates who've been around through all of that success. Like, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if they were like, yeah, I don't need a giant payday. I'll stick around here. We'll do 2-3 year deals. And then if they want to chase a cup in a few years, they can go do that. It wouldn't surprise me to see that.
So which do you think is more likely then? That they take a big pay cut on a 1-year deal to stay with Pittsburgh, or that they go somewhere else?
Which do I think is more likely?
Yeah.
That they go somewhere else.
Okay.
They're human beings at the end of the day.
With agents who are trying to make the most money possible off of them.
Yeah. You're not going to turn down multi-millions of dollars. It would not surprise me, however, to see Marc-Andre Fleury sign a 1-year deal here as his last year.
Not at all. And I think that would be a great pickup, right? Both of those guys, Domingue and Casey DeSmith, are UFAs making little money, even if they were. So bring him in with Jarry. Could be a great time.
Yeah.
All right. Which brings us to the Rangers and the Hurricanes. This is going to be a good series.
Yeah, it is. But the Rangers' first round has completely shaken my confidence in them. Way more than Carolina's. Like, they were both taken to 7 games by teams that I thought were not as good as them. I don't like, and I'm looking at my bracket right here, Carl, and I picked New York, and I don't agree with myself. Not after what we just saw.
Yeah, I also have New York winning this series on my bracket, and I would also like to switch that to the Hurricanes at this point.
A big reason, I think, Shesterkin did not look that good in that first round. Like, he was not the Shesterkin, the Hart Trophy finalist of the regular season.
No, he was not. There were saves that he made that were quite good, but I would argue that they're probably, I'm just take a a quick skim back over these games, but I would probably argue that there wasn't even a game that he won them.
Well, there was that one slick pass that he made. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
That was pretty. And then after that, in the couple of games that followed, I saw him eyeing up some other passes too. And I was like, don't get too confident, Igor.
Yeah, I guess in the end, in game 7, like he played a good game 7. He kept them in that. But the Penguins didn't have as much pressure as they have in some of those other games either.
Yeah. Yeah. So if he's going to be the Shesterkin of round 1, I think he's going to be eaten alive by this Carolina Hurricanes team.
Yeah, well, and what I find the Hurricanes have done this really well. They are, to me, when I think of this team and I think of like Sebastian Aho and Teuvo Teravainen and Nino Niederreiter and a bunch of other guys whose names are alliteration, I think of a strong offensive team, but they do such a great job that I don't think it's enough credit. And maybe this is just me not giving them enough credit, but just they can shut down a team's offense so well. Both their system, but also just the guys that they have on defense. And so that's how you can get by with Antti Ranta or Freddie Anderson, guys who typically aren't playoff level goalies, right? Or before Peter Mrazek, James Reimer, like carrying these guys through. And so I think it's going to be a tough series for the likes of, Chris Kreider, I think can still have a good series in this, but Artemi Panarin, who was not super effective until he scored the series winner. I think it'll be tough for him. I think it'll be tough for Zibanejad.
You mentioned Panarin. I thought the exact same thing. He wasn't really invisible throughout the series, but when he was visible, he wasn't doing like Panarin things. He did not look good. And then when he scored that goal last night, I thought, of course, he's the one who scores it, because I'm sitting here criticizing him in my head.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we're both taking Carolina to win this one then.
Yeah, I'm going to take Carolina in 5.
Wow, I'm going 7. These two just came off 7 gamers. Let's keep going.
All right. The next one.
Which brings us to our final series, the Battle of Alberta. Another 2 teams that just finished a 7-game series. Start with Edmonton beating LA in a pretty definitive game 7. Like, there was no question in that game who was the better team. And the Kings did way better than we thought they would the entire season. They did better than we thought they would in this series. It's a good time to be a Kings fan.
Don't you mean Connor McDavid beat them in game 7?
Hey, Connor McDavid beat them in game 6. Connor McDavid beat them in game 7. It was the Connor McDavids and the Edmonton Oilers.
It is amazing to me how that guy can just turn it on and decide like, okay, you know what, guys, I'll just win this for us. I'll just do it. Don't worry about it. You hang out back there.
As much as I love Cale Makar, there is no doubt who is the best player in the league. When you watch that, he's the only guy that literally took over any game so far in this playoffs and did it back-to-back games.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's unbelievable to watch. I was very surprised at how deep this series went. It looks here like I took Edmonton in 6, which even feels like a lot. Like the games that they lost, from what I have to admit, I didn't watch the entirety of all the games. It seemed like their goaltending was a big part of why they lost those games.
Why? So game number 1 was the Mike Smith turnover.
Yeah, brutal.
Okay. Game 2, Edmonton won 6-0. Then 8-2 game 3. Game 4 was just, they didn't play well at all. They didn't score. You can't win if you can't score. I'm not putting that. We can put the 4 goals on the whole team. That's not a Mike Smith issue there. Game 5, OT, sure. And then game 6 and 7, they were there. So, while yes, I think it's abundantly clear I'm not a Mike Smith fan. But shockingly, he was not the problem. Especially, thinking back to game trying to remember if it was game 6 or 7. The Kings had a substantial amount of chances in those games, and he actually clearly a shutout in game 7. Did a good job, not just like a okay enough job. Did a really good job shutting them down.
They have 2 shutouts in this series or 3?
2.
2.
There were 3 shutouts. One of them was the Kings, so 3 of the 7 games were shutouts.
Yeah. Okay. So you walking me through that, you're right. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for Mike Smith.
Yeah. When he needed to be good, he did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they did not have Darnell Nurse for game 6.
Yeah. The headbutt suspension.
The headbutt.
Which I think was fair.
The one that he didn't mean to do. I didn't know I was using my head to hit the other guy.
I can't be held responsible for where my head is going. I'm just a bobblehead. It's not my fault. I'm a human bobblehead.
Yeah, it was Darnell Nurse bobblehead night.
On the flip side, though, Calgary going 7 against Dallas, and I think we can all sit here and take away that Jake Oettinger was the star of that series.
That was the Jake Oettinger show. That whole series, and like that OT winner. What an amazing goal by Johnny Gaudreau. Like I wouldn't even put that on Oettinger. Like he had the net covered. Like Gaudreau found that little tiny hole and he put the puck exactly there.
That was the kind of goal that gets scored with, what was it, 4 minutes left or less in overtime. That's the kind of goal that you score when you're like, I'm just putting any puck I get on net. I've got a clear shot to net and I'm putting it on there, because you're right. There was no reason that you should have thought that would go in. And yet here it is. The game winner from standing on the goal line, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And before he scored that, there was a flurry of chances, 4 or 5 shots in a row that Oettinger turned away. Like, this guy was so good through the entire series. The Flames almost outshot them 2-1 throughout the series. And the Stars won 3 of those games. In
back-to-back, like just repeatedly, right? He kept them in this. The Stars were awful outside of him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's kind of what I expected from them.
You had them sweeping, did you not?
I had Calgary sweeping. Yeah, I did. That was my irresponsible pick.
Which wasn't true, but hey, I mean, without Oettinger there's maybe one. I think maybe it ends up Flames in 5. Even if the Stars get Markstrom level goaltending, and Markstrom was fine in this series. He was just completely outshone by what was happening in the other net.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So I don't know. Good for Oettinger, I guess. Dallas has their starting goalie of the future.
No doubt about that. Which brings us to what is going to be one heck of a series.
Yeah. Like, this is the big one of the second round, right? Like, this is the one. This is the appointment television. This is the one you circle on your calendar on the nights that it's going to be on, and you make sure to be on the TV in front of the TV for puck drop. This is going to be a crazy series. It is.
So it's going to be fast, right? Because you're going to have, you've got Connor McDavid there, so that's going to open things up big time for the Oilers side of it. The Flames just finished putting 100+ shot attempts a night on Dallas. And that, not an exaggeration for some of those, right? I think last night they had 120 shot attempts, 60 shots in multiple games, like just ridiculous. So I think it's gonna come down to goalies and just which offense can get going the fastest.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be a heavy series, man. Like, I think it's probably going to get a little mean, maybe not dirty, but just, a little dusty. This next round of the playoffs, the intensity's ramped up just a little more. You've got, maybe not these exact rosters don't have a rivalry, but there is like a franchise rivalry here between these two cities and these two teams. So I think that's going to be dialed up. Calgary did a lot of chirping in the first round with Dallas, so I could see them carrying that through.
Well, and Nikita Zadorov, I thought Jacob Trouba shouldn't have been suspended. I was surprised that Nikita Zadorov wasn't suspended for his hit in game 6.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he gets out of this series without a suspension.
Man, speaking of that, I thought Jamie Benn was going to kill somebody in that series. Every game he had like death eyes for somebody else.
Yeah. Just, I mean, that's the Kachuk factor that you bring in there, right?
Yeah, totally.
What is your pick for this series?
So I'm going to stick with what I put in my bracket. I put Calgary, but I think this is going 7.
I would say Calgary in 6 is my pick. Calgary in 6 is what I'll go with.
Okay. Do you have any of the history on the Battle of Alberta? Like, when was the last time these two teams played in the playoffs against each other?
I want to say it was the 80s.
Yeah,
that's when I believe the last time they met in the playoffs was. Let's see.
And that was a mean era of hockey, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. 91, I believe, was the last time they met in the playoffs.
Okay, it's been a long time.
1991. I mean, the last time they did, I believe Mike Vernon and Grant Fuhr were the goalies.
I know those names.
It's been a minute. I mean, it's gonna be good, and I think similarly to not Boston. My goodness, they're not even in here. Florida and Tampa. It is nice, even just like the geographical closeness of these, right? It's gonna make games like fan bases. It's not going to be just one fan base getting in there, right? You're going to have way more fans from both sides in the building, even, outside the arena. They've all got these watch parties happening outside. So just the atmosphere is going to be tough, but for the players, right? Like I'd be interested what the teams do. Like if you stay at home and then just fly down the day of, because I mean, it's an hour and a half flight from Calgary to Edmonton, or I assume it's similar from Tampa and Florida, right? Like Sunrise to Tampa. So
yeah, that's 100% what you do. Like, why would you put your players in a hotel where someone's going to pull the fire alarm in the middle of the night?
Right. So you don't have to worry about that, right? It's not like, I think back to, you mentioned the fire alarm. I think back to San Jose being here in Calgary, right? There's no choice. You're not flying in day of.
Yeah.
But when it's a 3-hour bus ride, if all else fails, you take the 3-hour bus ride.
Yeah. You make it happen that way. Sleep in the comfort of your own home. You don't have to deal with opposing fan bases. Much easier.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to even up this series and kind of take away the home ice advantage a little bit, right? Home ice is going to mean a little bit less this series, but those fans on both sides are going to be rowdy. This could be a lot of fun. This series gets started Wednesday again, the late game. We've got it going on, and really no big surprises, no real upsets in that first round
that we've picked. Oh, in the first round.
Yeah, in the first round.
No, I don't think so. We came very close to some upsets.
We came incredibly close to some very big upsets. However, really, I mean, Carolina got through. Carolina, I think, would have been the biggest upset if Boston had to beat them in those game sevens. But the top seeds made it, right? Like we look at the East, look at the Eastern Conference standings. Every team that made it are the 4 of the top 5, and the other one is Toronto. If we head to the Western Conference as well, 4 of the top 5 made it, and the other one is Minnesota. So these are the best teams. There's, the unfortunate Toronto, Tampa, and Minnesota, St. Louis matchups that stopped that from being perfect, but we've got the best teams in each conference still around, which is going to lead to some great hockey.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's a potential, if they're like the only potential upset in the second round is that Colorado St. Louis series. The others, I don't even know if I would define them as an upset.
Yeah, Colorado St. Louis would be an upset. The rest of them could go either way. I think I'd be shocked if any of those ended in 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
Let's very briefly, we got just a few minutes left. Let's touch on the Vegas firing of Coach Pete DeBoer. Vegas, who for the amount of success that they've had as a franchise, are just ripping through head coaches.
Very strange. Like they're so trigger happy on these decisions. I don't get it. Like the guy last year took them how deep? Conference finals.
Mm-hmm.
The year before that, he took them conference finals, second round. Can't remember.
Yes.
It was not a first round exit. So he's had success with the team. This last year was weird. And frankly, a lot of the, things that happened to this team were brought on by management, like trading your Vezina winning goalie, navigating the cap world with all these superstar players. I don't know. I don't put this season's disappointment on the head coach.
No, injuries, right? The fact that you had an entire top line, Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, Jack Eichel, all out for significant portions of the season. This is 1,000% a management decision, which also means that this is 1,000% management thinking that they aren't the problem, which is a huge issue.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I never thought they should have got rid of Jarry in the first place.
No. And they got very lucky that Pete DeBoer was able to step in and pick up where he left off.
Yeah. So very strange. It seems to me like the Trotz factor, he just seems like such a perfect fit for this roster.
Do you think that's where he goes then?
Yeah, kind of. I do. I mean, the roster, the potential is there in that roster.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So it's to me, it's like a head coach's, dream.
Yeah. I mean, with the talent that's on that roster, being able to take those guys in is great. Was there, I don't believe so, but I could be mistaken. Was there an overlap with Lehner and Trotz with the Islanders?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Because didn't Lehner go to Chicago first and then to Vegas?
Yes. Yeah. So he was there in 2008. Trotz started in 2018.
Oh, maybe there was a crossover then.
Was there in, if only we prepped a little bit more, we would know that. 1 year. So Lehner's 1 year with the Islanders.
Was with Trotz.
Was with Trotz.
All right.
So, and I mean, we saw that was kind of that was his best performance, right? That was his coming out party, Robin Lehner. So
yeah, that's right.
Could be a good one there. On the flip side, I need you to tell me this. Is Lambert is not a real person, is he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. But it's definitely the name I always have to look twice at because I always read something else the first time. But he was a player. Like he played in the NHL, I want to say for a long time.
No, Lane Lambert is the name of some arch nemesis in a DC comic. That's who Lane Lambert is.
Yeah, he definitely has a scar down the side of his face, right?
And I'm thinking I said DC, but now I feel like it's a Spiderman villain. I don't know who he is, but
dude, this is why I know this name. He played for Detroit in the 80s.
Oh, obviously. There
you go. And he played for the Rangers. He didn't have a long NHL career, but he played a little bit.
I mean, I think that makes sense why you would know why 21-year-old Lane Lambert played 5 years before you were born.
Yeah, I probably saw him in a stat book or something.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is so he was the assistant coach with this team beforehand. And while I know nothing about him other than that his name means he's not real.
He's been coaching in the NHL since 2011. He was an assistant coach in Nashville from 2011 to 2014, which probably means he was Trotz's assistant coach. And then he was an assistant coach in Washington from 2014 to 2018, which means he was probably, you seeing a trend here? He's probably Trotz's assistant
that means
coach.
He was Trotz's assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now in the 10th year of being Trotz's assistant coach, he somehow usurped him.
All it took. It's like, look, eventually one of these teams is going to hire me when they fire him. But when I look at that doesn't tell me that they're like, I did not realize that fact. This just tells me that they're going to get Trotz without
the same
Trotz.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, like this kind of record following that head coach round kind of feels like protege-ish, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe there's something about Trotz they didn't like. Maybe it is a true usurp. Like maybe Trotz is carrying his cardboard box of stuff out the door. He hears Lambert and he turns around. He's like, I can't, you, Lane, you.
He's a villain.
Of all people.
After all this. I mean, I'm really excited for the revenge story then.
After all we've been through.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I still think the Islanders could definitely be a playoff contending team next year. And we'll see what happens.
We will. It'll be interesting.
All right. Here's what we got to do, Nick. It is time for the second round of the playoffs, which means it is also time for score predicting high sticking to come back starting tomorrow night. You are not just telling us who you think is going to win the game. You are going to go to our Twitter at Fourth Line Podcast with the number 4 in there and tell us who you think is going to win every game and what you think the score will be. If you do that, you can rocket up the standings, which are jam-packed. Do you remember previously, friends of the show, Brody Cottenham tied the high sticking standings?
I do, yeah.
Well, after one round, he is tied again. And I don't know what we do if he ties us another time and loses.
You don't know what's going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know how we solve. First off, I have no idea how we solve a playoff tiebreaker when there's no more games left for us to do.
We're going to have to figure out something.
We can't just kick the can down the road on this one.
We'll figure out a fun tiebreaker if it comes down to that. But I think these games are going to get harder and harder to predict.
Absolutely. So you come in, you predict the score and who you think will win. If you get the winning team correct, you get 1 point, which opens up the option for you to get the bonus points. 1 point for each of the scores that you guessed correctly for a maximum of 3 points per game. And even though these guys have been, we just got through 8 matchups. Well, there's 7 left still, but these are worth triple the points from here on out. So no one is out of it. If you think there's no way I can make a comeback, you absolutely can. So head on over to Twitter at Fourth Line Podcast for that, the fourthlinepodcast.com, and listen everywhere. Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to shows, we are there for you. I'm ready. Games get fired up tomorrow night, and my TV will be booked solid every evening from here on out.
So that's it, Carl. Wrap it up.
Thanks, Nick.
Barry Trotz. His team stopped. Lots of shots. He never knew he'd be hurt by his friend Lane Lambert. Look out! Here comes Barry Trotz.